Hello and welcome to the Powerful Personal Brand Podcast. I am your host, Claire Bahn, and today I am joined by someone who brings a unique and deeply insightful perspective on the power of personal branding in the sports world. Welcome, Dr. Natalia Bredikina, to the show. Natalia is a sports management professor at the University of Delaware, a former Division I tennis player, and a leading voice in the academic research of sports marketing, social media, and personal branding. Much of her research focuses on how athletes, who are some of the most recognizable brands in the world, engage in personal brand building. She explores everything from the psychology of managing a brand to social media strategy to how consumers perceive athletes and their narratives. Today, we're going to talk about how personal branding is evolving in the sports world, the impact of social media, and why reputation management matters more than ever for athletes, students, and professionals working behind the scenes. Natalia, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Very excited and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah. So, I mean, you such a wide background in the sports world, so you can really talk about where it's started to where it is now. So you were in the sports world. Did you have to worry about your personal brand then?
Very interesting question. So I competed competitively in tennis growing up. I was
Mm-hmm.
growing up in Russia and then moved to the United States as an international student athlete, competed in Division I athletics. And I never really played at a level where I would start monetizing my personal brand as a junior athlete.
Okay.
Now, when I was playing in college, regulations were different than they are right now. At the time, we were amateurs in NCAA athletics, and they entailed a couple of things, including you couldn't really earn any money on monetizing your personal brand as an athlete. Student athletes are still amateurs, but 4 years ago, regulations changed, where in July of 2021, new name, image, and likeness, or NIL regulations came out. And so now student athletes are a new wave of influencers. And we are hearing a
Mm-hmm.
lot of examples of student athletes monetizing their personal brands. So I did not have that opportunity, but it's exciting to see that this generation of student athletes does, and definitely very interesting to follow.
So before they could monetize, no one had a brand. No one worked on a brand. That basically.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question. I think there are some examples of student athletes who are trying to monetize their personal brand, but not as an athlete. So, for
Okay.
example, there are some talented individuals who maybe are a student athlete and a fashion model at the same time. So they
Okay.
could brand
Yeah.
themselves and earn money on being a fashion model, but not necessarily a
Mm-hmm.
student athlete, because this is where it kind of crosses the line with monetizing your identity, your
Yeah.
athletic identity.
So, but besides monetization, so not thinking about monetization at all, but just thinking about a personal brand as far as like attracting opportunities and building a future. I mean, are you seeing that basically, that it's really shifted? Like people are now going, okay, and now I can monetize. Oh yeah, and now it can bring opportunities. Were people not thinking about branding themselves before, just for the future of what they were doing? That's
Well, yeah, so very interesting question. And don't want to kind of, speak about myself too much. But I do think that one of the reasons why I kind of developed my interest in that area is because although I never saw myself as a monetizable brand, I do feel like personal branding played a huge role in my career. For example, when you are being recruited to join a team, you have to position yourself well as a potential recruit, which is particularly challenging when you are an international student athlete reaching out to coaches from overseas. So you are trying to tell your story in a very condensed way, communicate things that they might want to hear, tell about your athletic achievements, who you are as a person, because they will think about how that will impact their team chemistry and things like that. So I think I probably didn't define it as personal branding back then, but some of those principles is something that I had to grasp early on when I started, my journey trying to get recruited to play in the US. I think personal branding is a very important concern for anyone, really, for student athletes, for young professionals. When we try to secure an internship or a job or get recruited to grad school, we have to emphasize not just our professional achievements or how great we did in school, but also some desirable characteristics that employers are looking for. And so I feel like this is something that has followed me throughout my career, and probably anyone really. If we are cognizant about that, I think it definitely gives us a little bit of a competitive edge, being able to position ourselves effectively.
Yeah.
But definitely in the recent years, for college athletes, that has become a more prominent concern while
Mm-hmm.
they are in college athletics. And I think the impact really varies. We have top athletes competing in primetime sports such as men's basketball, women's basketball, football. Those are revenue generating sports in college athletics. So they really have a chance to earn money on their personal branding. And then we have smaller athletes who are either competing for smaller kind of in-kind sponsorships, or maybe they're really trying to get a sponsorship, but they're struggling. So the impact and the access to opportunities really varies. But I do think right now personal branding has become a huge concern, like front and center in college
Yeah.
athletics.
Yeah. And I like that because that's what I was trying when the questioning was trying to get to, because a lot of people think of, I mean, we work with NIL athletes, and I'm not working with the top basketball players, but I'm and some of the top football, like we're working with great athletes, but so it's thinking about the future, that what they're building. And I think that's an important aspect to it. It's not just, oh, I'm not going to get the $10 million contract for whatever it might be. There's a way to build your brand for the future, and it's such an important. I started personal branding myself because I was trying to be I was working as an actress, and that was the best way I could get people to see what I could do. So that's how we can kind of say, okay, you know what, this may be what I can do here, but I can do these other things for the future. So I feel like a lot of times people think of only monetization, in that that's because like you said, when they were able to monetize, that was such a big thing, but there are other ways to build your brand for the future. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there, because I feel like it's a missed opportunity for a lot of college athletes. It may be like, oh, no one's going to want a woman, track and field person or something like that. And you're like, well, but think about other things that you could do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have seen athletes kind of tapping in all these different niches when it comes to sponsorships. And not everyone wants to work with a celebrity athlete. Like
Mm-hmm.
some companies purposefully are looking for kind of micro influencers or nano influencers. So, micro influencer, typically we would define it as someone who has maybe between like 10,000 to 100,000 followers on social media. Nano influencer, probably like 1,000 followers to 10,000 followers. And companies are now interested in collaborating with these individuals as well, because it's a very different niche and it's a
Mm-hmm.
very different logic in terms of how they engage with their audiences. So if everyone wanted to sign partnership with Cristiano Ronaldo, for example, they need to be willing to cash out like $1 million per post. Like that's a
Yeah.
very expensive collaboration. This is what, according to media reports, someone like that charges. But if you want to work with maybe more athletes, but smaller scale, you can potentially reach diverse audiences, because every athlete is going to come with a specific niche that they're engaging. They're probably cheaper to work with. They're
Mm-hmm.
not going
Yeah.
to charge as much. And another component that comes with it is oftentimes nano influencers or micro influencers would be perceived as being more authentic. And so there are
Mm-hmm.
a variety of reasons why companies are interested in working with this kind of more niche athletes or niche influencers. And so I really feel like personal branding should be of interest to everyone who wants to monetize their personal brand as athlete or maybe as a smaller scale influencer. But as you said, this doesn't need to come down just to monetization, and it's important to position ourselves effectively even for securing potential future opportunities. And I have had a chance to talk to some athletes as part of my research as to why they are trying to develop their NIL, as to why they're trying to develop their personal brand. And I would say financial considerations were just one piece. It was not the only
Mm-hmm.
piece. These participants also talked about the importance of professional development. For instance, as a student athlete, your schedule is typically very busy. So you have athletics, you have academics, and oftentimes they don't have a chance to even engage enough in internships or jobs that
Mm.
the regular students would. So for them, NIL oftentimes becomes that chance to learn the principles of marketing, the principles of positioning your personal brand. So I feel like what you learn through engaging in that process is also important. And of course, many of those skills that they develop as student athletes hopefully will translate to when they join the professional world and are not interested in monetizing their personal brand anymore. But they have learned how to position themselves effectively. They have learned how to talk to audiences. They have learned how to negotiate deals, how to negotiate self-presentation. So I think it's not just about monetization, and it's of course there are a lot of transferable skills that come with it.
No, that's really interesting. Yeah, it kind of learning in the trenches versus like having an internship. You learning like this works, this doesn't work. Okay, I need to up level my game here because that didn't work. So that is an interesting thing I hadn't thought of. So because we were talking about it, so we were talking about obviously college athletes and things like that, but let's like talk about like from the coaches office, people in the front office of either a sports league or working at a university. Personal brand, no one thought about it. And now have you seen a shift in people kind of that are in the peripheral area, not just the athletes, worried about the personal brand?
Great question. So I will say in my research, I do look primarily at athletes, but I do
Okay.
think that would be an important consideration for coaches as well, or for
Yeah.
professionals, or even I'm in academia for professors too, because these days everyone is on social media. Like we have over 2 or 3 billion people on Instagram logging in
Mm-hmm.
monthly. I don't remember the exact number, but it's everyone is on social media. This is where you want to engage people. And so if you're able to tell your story effectively, whether
Yeah.
it's on LinkedIn or on Twitter, wherever those professionals are present, I think this is how you manage your self-presentation. This is how you build exposure through continuously, learning a little bit more information about someone. We become more familiar with them. So that makes us
Mm-hmm.
feel safer. It's a very natural human tendency to like something more or to feel safer around someone that we are more familiar with. And so I feel like
Mm-hmm.
by engaging effectively and engaging regularly with audiences through social media, but also other channels, we can kind of reap the rewards of, I guess, building an effective personal brand.
Yeah. Like, so if there's somebody that, okay, they're listening to this, they're like, you know what, I haven't monetized my personal brand. I am a student athlete. I'm really interested in kind of building something. What are like 3 tips that you would give them to get started?
Hmm. Great questions. I actually recently had a conversation like with a student athlete about that. Like, where do we start?
Perfect.
I think we start by just like self-reflection, probably even just like journal and sitting down and thinking, who we are and what makes us unique, but also how do we want to position ourselves? Because that self-presentation process will really be kind of a dance between who I really am and being authentic and not being afraid to push the boundaries a little bit, because you don't want
Mm-hmm.
to be like everybody else, but at the same time you have to kind of define your niche, and you want to define, I don't want to say the norms of your own self-presentation, but kind of maybe the style, like how you want to present yourself, and then kind of define the specific objectives, like where do you want to take it, what are you trying to achieve, because that will also help you understand which parts of yourself you want to highlight. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
has multiple identities, so it's about understanding which identity you really want to bring a spotlight on, and maybe depending on who you brand yourself with, that strategy will be a little bit different. Let's say if I'm a student athlete engaging on Instagram, where I build a student athlete brand, it's going to be about fitness. It's going to be maybe a spotlight in some sponsored products in the world of sports. But as I start building my personal brand to join the professional world in the future on LinkedIn, that's going to be a very different self-presentation. And I want to highlight maybe some professional things, academic achievements, something like that. So, using that as an example, I feel like everyone has different identities, and we have to be strategic about how we
Yeah.
highlight that. So kind of identifying objectives, identifying how our self-presentation strategies are going to help us achieve those objectives, and then probably also just being willing to fail. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
self-presentation is we have this dramaturgical theory of self-presentation in the world of sports marketing and marketing in general, which essentially suggests that when a person engages in any social interaction, not just personal branding, it's kind of like a theater performance. we strategize things on the back end in our minds, and then we perform them to our audiences, whether it's social media followers, maybe someone I'm interacting with, maybe my students in the class when I'm lecturing. So my audience will perceive me in a certain way, and they will provide a feedback. And based on that feedback, I will adjust my future self presentations. And so this really is a cycle of learning through trial and error, kind of understanding how the audiences perceives you, if that is the type of perception that you want to project on them, and if not, how do you want to adjust that moving forward. And I feel like with people in particular, it's very interesting because we are not organizations, we are not robots, we are humans. So it really is about having a little bit of fun with it, telling a real story about our lives and how it evolves over time, but also kind of being a little bit strategic. How do we want to polish that? What sides of our personality we want to kind of emphasize versus maybe, not emphasize so much. So I think it's an interesting process and definitely quite a bit of trial and error. And talking to athletes who have been able to successfully build their personal brand and were satisfied in the end of the process, I think for them it's sticking through that and believing that in the end you will kind of generate the results that you want. Just like in anything, really, even in sports, you have to fail first before you achieve something significant.
I mean, I feel like that what you learn in sports, right? That you have where you start isn't where hopefully you end, right? And during even a season, you might you have to work up on strength and agility and all of these kind of things. So yeah, kind of getting in there, going like your first post won't be like your 100th post, and don't criticize yourself so harshly and things like that. I actually heard someone that I follow on social media, and he basically was talking about when you're speaking, when you're doing videos, think about what you want the person watching to leave with. Because I think a lot of times we don't think about that. You're like, I have to do this. Oh, so and so's they say that I need to. So I feel like if you don't want to do it, then don't do it. Because there's nothing worse than everyone knows you're faking it. Everyone knows you don't want to be there and you think it's stupid. Like, stop. Like, there's too much noise online. Just stop. If you want to do it, like you said, be yourself, be authentically you, but what do you want people to be left with? Because that's an important thing, because sometimes we can rush through what we're saying, or we kind of miss the point. I know sometimes I can do that. I kind of am like, where was I going with this? But if you think about, this is my intention, it's a whole different way of dealing with it. So yeah, it's sometimes so hard. I mean, as adults, we're going like, oh, this is what these kids need to do. But when I was in college, it's a lot of self-awareness. Do you find that, maybe it's like those old soul type people that do better at this?
I think it's an interesting process. And as you said, it's a lot of it comes down to focusing on the audience and kind of what is something that we want the audience to take away. So one has to be focused on the purpose. And the purpose is exactly, if we are engaging in personal branding, yes, the purpose is to have fun with it, but also it's about projecting desirable perception on other people. And so I really feel like someone who has a strong self-awareness, kind of knows who they are and what they want to communicate, will probably be good in this field. But I also feel like someone who is just innovative, is not afraid to try new things, is not afraid to put themselves out there, and is not going to kind of second guess themselves or doubt themselves after the first negative feedback that they receive. I think that's another kind of, resistance to, or maybe immunity to rejection, so to speak, a little bit. I feel like it's a very important.
If you could have all of those, you'd just be like perfect.
Yeah.
I've literally seen executives that are senior executives, CXOs, just crumble when they get a negative comment. So I can only imagine in college. You're learning about who you are. So yeah, it is a process. And kudos to those who really just give it their all, because like you said, they share who they really are. The other thing that I find is, if someone they're like, I'm not super charismatic, I don't have all these things that I want to share. If they think about talking to their former self, They're like before they became a college athlete, like what advice would they give for like a high school athlete? Like that can often help people bridge that gap going, oh, wow, what advice would I want? Kind of being selfish essentially, but that helps other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you talked about that, probably, going on a tangent a little bit, but made me think about one of the research projects that we are currently conducting, which focuses on how student athletes respond to cyberbullying online, both
Mm,
mentally, but also like explicitly, like in the comments, like, are you going to delete this comment? Are you going to respond to this comment? What are you going to do with it? And I feel like that's obviously a little bit extreme, but in a way,
yeah.
that's a perfect test for, is your self-esteem getting affected by those negative
Hmm.
comments that you are getting? And people who seem to be handling that well from our research are two types of people. It's either individuals who are focusing on the purpose. So I am getting those negative comments, but I'm going to disregard them. I'm not going to pay attention to them because I'm so focused on the purpose and kind of impacting people around me. And the second type, in a way, it kind of probably resonates with what you mentioned. It's someone who is able to look back and think about how much they achieved and how much they have to be proud of, and maybe even
Hmm.
focus on like younger audiences or maybe other people who might be watching, who might be taking inspiration from this individual and thinking that you're doing it for them. And obviously, particularly online, this was always come with criticism, or sometimes we
Yeah.
create posts that just doesn't receive the engagement we wanted, but it doesn't
Hmm.
necessarily mean that something is wrong with us. This is a part of
Yeah.
being online and engaging online.
Yeah, we always say that it means that you're doing something right if people are kind of making negative comments. But yeah, I hadn't thought of that as well. Like, yeah, that's also just got to be really hard because not only do you need to be mentally tough in your sport, if you're injured or things happen or you lose a game or whatever, but you also have to be tough enough to also deal with this kind of extraneous stuff that in the scheme of the world doesn't really matter, and being able to just really say, you know what, this troll doesn't matter. Are you finding in your research that it does affect their mental health?
Yeah, so that has become a pretty big issue, actually. There have been
Mm,
research even conducted by like organizations and agencies in sports. National Collegiate Athletic Association launched a research on cyberbullying a couple of years ago because they were very concerned with how that affects athletes. World Athletics as well
yeah.
did the same thing, looking at how, who is being primarily targeted, which is typically women, and women of
Mm,
color seem to be the primary targets of those cyberbullying instances. But yeah, I do think that it definitely poses some risks for athletes'
mhm,
mental health. And one of the striking findings from our research was that some of our participants mentioned resorting to therapy, feeling like they need to engage in
mhm,
therapy because of social media, but still deciding to
yeah.
stay on social media because they need that for personal branding. So for me, that combination kind of captures what it means to be an athlete these days. Probably you feel like you are
Yeah.
expected to be, outspoken and to position yourself publicly, but at the same time, even though that produces pressures for them, they feel like they have to continue. So definitely there are some risks for mental health, but again, I feel like
Mhm,
kind of approaching that from the perspective that the athlete or whoever that might be, publicly branding themselves, they're doing it for themselves, they're doing that
mhm,
for other people that they impact positively. I feel like
yeah.
focusing on the purpose, focusing on the audience is something that's very important to be able to go through that process.
Yeah. I mean, just thinking, I mean, obviously having negative comments on social media, that's horrible, but as an athlete, especially if they move into the professional world, and things like that, professional athlete, athlete, I was just thinking about how in the World Series, about how like Shohei, when he was in Canada, how they booed him. Totally not. I went to game 3 of the World Series and he was not being booed at Dodger Stadium. So you just have to deal with some negativity and you still have to do your job. It's such a tough thing to add another layer of another negative thing that these people have to deal with. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Do you have any advice for that? Except like, yeah, you need to go to therapy. It sounds so horrible.
Well, I mean, I think therapy is probably whatever works for someone, whether it's
Yeah.
with respect to challenges encountered on social media or in general in life. I
Yeah.
feel like there can be a variety of ways to kind of, find peace after an instance like that. It could be therapy, it could be journaling, it could be
Yeah.
distancing yourself from social media for a certain period of time. And interestingly, some athletes and even some coaches, they have created rules on the team, such as if we lose, you shouldn't go on social media in the next 4 hours, because what's going to be
Mm,
happening there, especially if you are like an athlete in a visible sport, is going to be wild, and you don't
yeah.
want that to affect yourself. So definitely, there is a whole sort of like, I guess, like, barriers to protect themselves that athletes
Yeah.
or public personas can try to establish. But generally, I think, again, unfortunately, probably if someone is that popular, or if they are in a visible sport, they have to be kind of acceptant of the fact that this is a part of the reality. This is a part of
Hmm.
being a public persona. This is a part of building a monetizable brand, and just learning to kind of how to shield themselves from that in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, just thinking about the upside, right, of like someone, obviously Shohei and some of these really top athletes, like there's a huge upside. Yes, there's like some negative, but there's huge upside, especially monetarily and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think also, if someone like Shohei Ohtani is building a personal brand, I feel like in some ways maybe it's a little bit easier to distance yourself from that, because they probably have
Mm.
a professional marketing team
Yes.
kind of helping them with that, maybe doing that.
Deleting those negative
Yeah,
comments.
helping manage the brand, posting things on time.
Yeah.
I feel like one of the, I guess, one of the groups of my primary concern personally would be athletes who are, let's say, in college sports, or even outside of college sports, in Olympic sports, for example, who are big
Mm,
enough to receive that visibility, but sometimes not big enough to kind of really engage a professional marketing agency to take that pressure off of them when that happens. So I feel like this is when
hmm.
that becomes particularly challenging, when you are your own
Yeah.
manager and you are your own content creator, and you are kind of dealing with all of this, because I think this is when that can really have a strain on mental health.
Yeah. It's crazy. So you're kind of looking at all of this sports management from the academic side. Are there any trends that you're currently watching from how teams and leagues are approaching individual brand building?
Mm, Very interesting question. Teams and leagues. I feel like probably storytelling is a huge component of that, and
Okay.
just bringing, kind of elevating athlete stories is a great way of enriching the brand. And in my opinion, Kansas City Chiefs, for example, are doing a really good job kind of integrating their stories and bringing attention to their athletes as part of their collective brand as a team, whether it's Patrick Mahomes or Travis Kelce. And I feel like
Mhm.
obviously that's a little bit natural in a way. There is so much attention that even Taylor Swift, being a huge personal brand of herself, kind of
Mhm.
brought to that entire brand ecosystem by kind of,
They
orchestrating
didn't
her.
even need it, but they got it.
Yeah, but I do think in general the team does a good job, kind of like strengthening that ecosystem through bringing attention to kind of notable athletes, or even Andy Reid, the coach, kind of building
Hmm.
a lot of fan perception around that.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely see a lot of other teams doing that as well. Are you seeing collegiate teams do the same thing to help build their brand? Because no one, it's, yeah, when you're kind of faceless, it's kind of hard to really get excited. But when you're kind of rooting for people, for the people on the team, and their story, hardships, it can make it just totally a different experience.
Yeah, very interesting question. I do think, generally, I think on social media, sharing content from athletes, maybe highlighting some of their individual achievements, almost becomes natural. So I
Hmm.
think, generally, in my opinion, teams that are visible tend to do that well. With that being said, when it comes to athletic department level, for example, or club level, let's say if you have a men's team and a women's team in the soccer world in Europe, I think this is where some challenges start with respect to whom they tend to emphasize, which is in sport in particular. We have this persistent issue related to valuing some sports over others, or maybe male athletes over female athletes. So I feel like sometimes stories tend to focus a lot on those, again, athletes in primetime sports. I think it's important to
Hmm.
build a more diverse representation for athletes when it comes to like those accounts at the athletic department level, or we conducted research on European soccer clubs and kind of how they brand their men's and women's teams, and found a huge imbalance with them emphasizing kind of the brands of their male athletes compared to female athletes. So I think generally teams do that well, but from the equity standpoint and maybe even storytelling standpoint, they can definitely do better oftentimes.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's cases of that too, even with the NBA and the WNBA and all sorts of things. So there still needs to be improvement.
Yeah.
Well, this has been like an amazing conversation. So many things that obviously we could talk about in this sports marketing space, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me today. So, if anyone wants to connect with you, where is the best way to do that?
Oh, well, I have a LinkedIn profile, so definitely can find me on LinkedIn.
It'll be in the description.
Yeah, so probably it's the best way.
Okay. Well, we'll be in the description. And Natalia, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time, and really a great conversation. And you're doing like amazing research. And I hope that there's changes as far as like the women's in those professional sports getting more eyes. And obviously, I feel for the young college athletes and all the athletes in general that have to deal with such trolls. So, like anything we could do to kind of fix that and fortify them so they don't have to kind of deal with that would be good. I don't know if that is a thing we could do, but
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. So it was a pleasure to join you and to talk a little bit more about personal branding.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.